Okay. Thank you very much. On the night of January 14th, 2011, the planet Venus looked remarkably bright. It sparkled 10 times brighter than any other star. On that same night, the pilot on a Boeing 767 passenger jet took his aircraft to a steep dive, bouncing passengers off the ceiling, injuring 16 passengers, and nearly collided with another aircraft flying 1,000 feet below. And now, of course, you may wonder what's the connection between the planet Venus and mid-air near collision. Well, the fact is that the pilot mistook the planet Venus for another aircraft coming right at him and reacted immediately on his visual input. Human performance has its limitations. For many years, human performance and limitations has been a mandatory topic for pilots, but it wasn't until a couple of years ago that EASA decided that cabin crew members should receive instructions in human performance and limitations as well. And this is the reason for NaviMinds to bring this up today. We thought we'd highlight and bring focus to one of the elements of human performance and limitations, and we chose information acquisition and processing. Before we go further into the topic, we'd like to say thank you to a participant in one of our CRM trainer courses. We'd like to thank Mr. Daniel Lipnik from the Estonian Border Police for giving us the inspiration to this presentation. Santiago Ramon Carral was a Spanish pathologist specializing in neuroanatomy in the late 19th century and early 20th century. He spoke out those words. Everything may die, nothing may be regenerated. And with those words, he indicated that a damaged human brain would never have the prospect of being healed. Little did he know what science would later discover. Michelle Mack is a woman born with only half a brain, and she's leading a perfectly normal life. She's turned medical thinking upside down, and because the right side of her brain has rewired itself to take over functions normally controlled by the left side of the brain. We now know that the human brain can regenerate various functions and create new connections, even if we're adults and no longer have the same neural plasticity as children. The human brain is amazing. Look at those numbers on the next picture here. The human brain has approximately 86 billion neurons in the brain. On each of these cells, there are 10,000 synapses, which are the ones responsible for the connections between the nerve cells. This gives us more than 10 times 10 times 10 times 125, a lot of times, and a lot of possible connections. Think about how much we can do with our brains, how many connections we can create. And imagine how many places it could go wrong, especially when trying to separate fact from fiction or truth from imagination. So let's start with our senses, and I'm hoping very much for your participation here. So can everyone please indicate to me, tell me what are the senses?
Sight.
Sight is one. Sight.
Touch.
Touch is another one.
Taste.
Smell.
Smell.
Oh, yeah. Well done. There's one more. Hearing. More? Okay. Today, these 5 senses are considered such an elementary truth that it's sometimes used as a point of consensus. If only it were that simple. So, could you give me one more sense? And I'm not looking for a common sense, and I'm not looking for nonsense either. But maybe one more sense? Okay, can I please ask you then to stand up? I can ask you you all to close your eyes, just a moment. You get to open them in a moment. Just close your eyes and lift one leg, please. Thank you. How were you keeping your balance? Thank you. You may sit down again. Thank you very much. I hope it's okay that I add now one more sense. I'm going to add balance to this one. One more sense. Okay, if I may ask you now to look up in the ceiling, right? And I'm only asking you to do that because I don't want you to look at your iPhones or your watches. So please ask yourself, how long time do you think that I've been going on with this presentation? How long time do you think I've been going on with my presentation? Yeah, note that to yourself, or maybe even to your seatmate. And I can inform you that I've been going on for approximately 6 minutes now. But I think I can add the sense of time. One more sense. Okay, can I ask you to close your eyes again? Now take your index finger and point to your nose with your index finger. I see you all managed. You managed because you do have a sense of proprioception. The feeling of meaning the sense of the relative position of one's own body parts, and also the sense of the strength and effort put in the movements. Proprioception. Without mind. One more. Lunch is coming up soon, isn't it? I'm getting hungry. If you are, you would know that because you do have a sense of hunger as well. What's the temperature in the room? I'm guessing your guess would be something around 20 or 22 minutes, certainly not 15 or 13, sorry, minutes. Degrees Celsius, of course. Certainly not 15 degrees or 30 degrees. So you would know that because you have a sense of temperature as well. How reliable, just how reliable are those senses then? Do you know that if your food is served on a smaller plate, you will feel full eating less food than if food is served on a larger plate? Simply because the amount of food looks bigger on a smaller plate, and your brain will interpret this as if you eat more just because the food is served on a smaller plate. Remember the time experiment, when I asked you to note how much time I've been going on with this presentation. Some of you were probably pretty accurate, whereas others were maybe more than a minute off track. We've learned that we do have a sense of time, but it also that it might not be all that accurate. To trick our senses is very easy, especially visual illusions are well known. I'm sure you've all seen examples of visual illusions, such as these ones. How many legs does the elephant have? Is the lady turning to the right or to the left? Is the dress gold and white or black and blue?
That's a big picture.
Yeah. Okay, I'll end my talk about visual illusion with a small trick. I'm pretty sure I can make you see what seems to be a floating sausage in front of your eyes. Are you with me? Do you want to try?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's what you do. You take your two index fingers close to each other, like they're pointing at each other. Pretty close to each other. Now, while looking at your index fingers, you bring them up to about 10 centimeters in front of your eyes. Now look slightly up and over your fingers to a point further away. Do you see the floating sausage? You can even make it dance actually if you move your fingers a little.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Okay. It's enough of this, it's fine. Thank you. I will actually move on to something else. I would like now ask you to listen to some sounds or music if you like. And I'd like you to just sit back and relax, listen to the sound, music, or maybe even tap your feet and feel the rhythm in the music. It comes in just listening to the sound. I hope the sound is on, is it? Let's see. It sounds like the music is playing faster and faster and faster, but it isn't really. It's just another layer of music taking over the first layer, but the rhythm stays the same. It's nothing but an auditory illusion.
I think most of us know, and we've already concluded that our senses may not be all that reliable, although we have an amazing brain. So let's go back and have another look at the brain. And what you'll see basically is a few different pictures showing the pathways, connections between neurons in the brain on newborn, children of different ages to adults. And if you look up here, you see how the pathways become more and more complicated and more dense with age. It's like the tracks between the nerve cells become deeper and deeper over time, making experiences more consolidated, but also making it slightly more difficult, very much more difficult actually, to get out of those tracks. So our brain is set up in its ways with the tracks, but just how difficult is it to get out of those tracks? Let's see if we can demonstrate that. I think you're going to assist Dan doing that. What we've got up here is a bicycle, which at a first glance looks like a completely normal bicycle, and it basically is, apart from where it's one of the ones you can fold together and put in the car. But also we've changed one tiny little thing, and that is when you turn the steering wheel to the right, the wheel will go to the left and vice versa. It's only one tiny little change, and actually we'd like one of you to come up here and try it, and actually if you manage to just ride it for a few meters, we also have a little reward for you. So who would like to come up and try it?
Okay, I'll try it.
Okay, and we do actually have a helmet, so may we just stress that this is completely your own responsibility.
Oh. On Monday I have to be good if something happens. This is what? No, oh God. Like aliens. Don't want to move that?
I don't know if we can move the bike.
Maybe want to do that.
Further.
Which way? Oh my God.
Actually, yeah.
Right? Be careful now.
Yes.
Promise us to be careful.
Oh my God! That's crazy! Oh my God! Wait a second, I have to think. So. Oh gosh, that's. How much do I have? How far do I have to go to get something? What?
Just a few meters, 3 meters or something.
3 meters. Okay, so.
I think we'll accept that. Thank you very much.
That's really hard. Can you do it?
Right, and the little something Anne got that.
To remember your excellent.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I can actually say that when I brought this home, I thought I could just ride it from my neighbour who fixed it for us, and I realised I couldn't. I thought I'll just walk, and I couldn't even do that, so I had to carry it. So what's going on then? Well, it's got to do with the tracks that were made in our brain when we learned to ride a bicycle as children. And we've done that many times since. So the tracks in our brains have become very, very deep and set in its ways. It seems stuck, the brain finds it really hard to get out of its habits. You could see it like tracks in the snow, really. The deeper the tracks, the more difficult it becomes to get out of them, but on the other hand, the more comfortable it becomes to stay in them. But back to the bike experiment, just how long would it take a 7-year-old who already knows how to ride a normal bike to learn to ride this one, and how long would it take for someone the age of 35 to 40? I hope I'm not offending anyone, I think that's pretty much the average age in here. Well, the fact is that it would only take, with a bit of practice every day, it would take approximately 2 weeks for the 7-year-old to be able to actually do this. Whereas for an adult, it takes 8 months with a bit of practice every day. So
next year.
Next year, with a lot of hard work. Yes. So the Spanish pathologist that Anne was talking about, Santiago Ramón y Cajal, was wrong when he said that the human brain couldn't create new pathways. We know that science tells us differently. We know now that you can teach an old dog new tricks. Now, of course, we don't want to leave you with the impression that it's almost impossible to strengthen one's own brain and the plasticity in the brain. So we've collected a few tips on how we as adults can strengthen our brains and keep the plasticity in a certain level. Some of them are, of course, obvious: healthy food, physical activity, and when we talk about physical activity, it's in particular the frontal lobes that are strengthened. If you know 1, 2 or more languages, use them. There have been examples specifically related to use of different languages, that in itself can help postpone dementia with many years, actually. Play a musical instrument, listen to music, learn something new, maybe like riding a bike like this will actually strengthen your brain. So generally, challenge yourselves. But most importantly, however, our postulate today is that having the awareness and the knowledge that the mind and the senses can play tricks with us and can deceive us might just be what saves us from mistaking the planet Venus for another aircraft. We hope you enjoyed this short presentation about information acquisition and processing, and we'd actually like to finish with some clever words from a guy called Destin Sandlin. He's actually the one who originally came up with the idea for this bike. And he said, "So be very careful how you interpret things, because you are looking at the world with a bias, whether you think you are or not." And that completes our presentation. Thanks very much.